All right, so because of Shavuot's coming, this morning we're not going to use the Chumash except for maybe one line, so put it away. Instead, I've passed out a sheet. The tradition is that on the holiday of Shavuot we read the book of Ruth. I don't have any more, so just move over next to somebody interesting and ask them to share. The book of Ruth is one of the 5 Megillot, one of the short books of the Bible. Each one is assigned to a holiday. The book of Esther, of course, tells the story of Purim, so it's read on Purim. The book of Lamentation tells the story of the destruction of Jerusalem. To Marcia in the back. The book of, that's read on Tisha B'Av. The book of Kohelet, which is a reflection on nature and man, is read on Sukkot. Shir HaShirim, a powerful erotic love song, is read on Passover, because after 2 nights of matzah, who isn't in the mood for love, you know? And the book of Ruth is read on Shavuot, and you'll see why. First, because it's a harvest book, and second, because it has to do with the giving and receiving of Torah. We read it last year. I actually looked up the tape to make sure that I did it. So we read it last year, so we're not going to go over, I try not to go over all the stuff we did last year, but I want to take a look at it in a couple of different ways today. So you all have a copy of the book. It's a very short book. It's only 4 chapters, and it's easily read in an hour, but we'll probably take longer than that. What's interesting is the Bible knows epic stories. Plagues rain down from heaven and destroy Pharaoh. The seas split to allow the people their salvation. God shows up on Mount Sinai in thunder and lightning. Joshua destroys the walls of Jericho. David slays Goliath. The Bible knows all kinds of wonderful, epic, dramatic stories. In this book, nothing happens. Esther bests Achashverosh. That's remarkable. Elijah bests the prophets of Baal. This story isn't about a nation, it's about one family. And not even a remarkable family, not even a famous family, just a family. And what happens to this family? Well, basically, here's the whole plot of the book. Times are bad, they leave home, right? All the men in the family die, the women come back, the girl remarries, and the family starts over again. That's the whole story. So why is this story here? What makes this story so interesting? That's one of the questions. So this is a story not about great historical, epic, epochal kinds of changes in the world. This is about the drama of one family. All right, if you like Jane Austen novels, and movies, you'll love the Book of Ruth. Because it's not about major things, it's about the tiny micro dramas that go on in families. That's what this book is about. Right? This is a family about the characters and how characters change and how the way a character looks. And what's particularly interesting, and you get this already from the title of the book, that it's not about men, it's about women. In fact, it's not only about women, it's about a particular kind of woman. And the clue to the kind of woman that the story is going to tell us is at the very end of the book. So if you'll turn to the 3rd page of the handout, and look all the way to the bottom of the page. I'm going to give away the end of the story, which is a hell of a way to start a talk. But look at verse 11 on chapter 4, which is the very, very end of the story. Do you see it? All the people at the gate and the elders answered, "May the Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, prosper in Ephrat and perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So at the very end of the book, the storyteller compares the hero of the story and the circumstance of the story to 2 other biblical tales. Now, just incidentally, right, and my dear friend and teacher, Rabbi Rudd, is here, and he'll testify to that if I'm right, very rarely does a biblical story reference another biblical story. It doesn't happen very often. That they say, oh yeah, that's just like, usually when we read it, we do that. Commentators do that. Rashi does that. But usually when you're reading a story, it just tells you, in the story it doesn't say, oh, that's like the other one. But here you have a biblical story. Myra, come in. Just don't stand at the door. There's lots of good room. Very rarely does a biblical story say, oh yeah, this is just like these other. So here we're being told this story is to be read in the context of two other stories. The story of Rachel and Leah and the story of Tamar and Judah. And there's a blessing involved. You should be as fruitful as they were. Now this raises all sorts of interesting things. We'll get into this in just a moment, but there's a tzad hashaveh. There's an analogy being drawn here. Why is this story like Rachel and Leah and the story of Tamar and Judah? Well, first of all, these stories are all about women and the role of women in the covenantal community. That's the first thing. Second of all, these women are, questionable. These stories all contain sexual intrigue. Things that happen undercover, literally, covers, in the night. These are stories where the covenantal drama gets stuck. And it's a woman who is prepared to put herself in a place of remarkable vulnerability, sexual vulnerability, that moves the covenantal story forward. One more way to look at it. Tamar and Leah and Ruth are all invisible. This is the story of invisible people. What does that mean, invisible people? In the Rachel and Leah story, remember the story? We learned it some months ago. Jacob comes to Haran, running away from his brother, falls crazy in love with his cousin Rachel, right? Who bears a remarkable resemblance to his mother, but that's another problem, right? It's true. I mean, Dr. Freud read Torah, He falls in love. He makes a deal with his uncle Laban that he'll work 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. He works 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. He goes to his wedding chamber that night. He has the night with his wife. He wakes up in the morning, and the Torah's wonderful phrase is, V'hinei hi Leah. He wakes up in the morning and, whoo, it's Leah. So what happens is, Leah, then he runs to his uncle and says, what'd you do to me? And the uncle says, we always marry the older one first. You knew that. Work for me 7 more years and you can have her sister. And Leah becomes the invisible, unloved wife in the relationship, right? Then you have the story of Judah and Tamar. Judah, you remember Judah, he's the 4th son of Leah, and he's one of the more prominent brothers. And now it's getting cold in here. Damn you. Would somebody do me a favor? Many of you are people of serious means and you love the Jewish people. Donate a damn thermostat, would you? Just write Bart Pacino as the executive director of letters. Say, Rabbi, I would like to make the rabbi happy, right? Enclosed a check for $500,000 and another $42 for a new thermostat. You can name it for me. It's the Feinstein family thermostat, right? When it's hot, we're freezing. When it's cold, we're boiling. Okay. What happens in the story? Judah separates from his brothers, goes to a certain section of Canaan, marries a Canaanite woman, has 3 children. Okay? In the course of 3 children, the oldest child grows up, and he matches the oldest child with a woman from the neighborhood whose name is Tamar. And during their honeymoon, the groom is struck down. So, carrying out the tradition of marrying the widow to the brother, we don't do this anymore, thank God, but they used to marry the widow to the brother-in-law. So he's married to the second, and the second one doesn't want to die, so he gets killed also. And then finally, she's supposed to be married to the third brother, but Judah knows bad luck when he sees it. And you remember the story? And refuses to marry Tamar to the third brother. And Tamar knows that this is death of the family. There's no child, there's no heir. So she dresses up as a harlot, a prostitute, hides herself by the side of the road. Judah comes by, she seduces him, as it were. He doesn't have his credit cards with him. It's true, don't leave home without it. That's where that came from. So he leaves his staff and his ring. Then the word gets out that Tamar is pregnant. Judah is outraged that his daughter-in-law has, as it were, played the harlot, and he accuses her of adultery. And she shows up and shows him the signet and the staff and says, "Whose are these?" And he knows that he's done wrong, and he confesses his wrong. And Peretz is born of this. and Peretz is the ancestor of the tribe of Judah. Now, in both cases, you have a woman who puts herself in sexual intrigue, a woman who puts herself in a place of vulnerability, but most of all, a woman who's invisible, a woman who is overlooked, a woman who doesn't play a large role in the drama until she realizes that this is her moment. And the question is, what does that person do for us? Now, you can think about a couple of, so when I read biblical stories, as you know, the question I want to know is, who told this story and why? And why did they put this in the Bible? What purpose did it serve the larger community, besides the fact that it's a charming story, an interesting story? What purposes did it serve the larger community interest to include this story in the Scripture? So think again about the structure of the story. There's a family, they leave home, they live in exile, they suffer tragedy. They need to return, and in returning to their land, the way that they prosper in that land is through the courage and the loyalty and the kindness of the one who was rendered invisible. Keep that structure in mind as we read through the story, and ask yourself, where in the story of the people Israel was this story important? To honor and to recognize the role of the invisible one in moving forward the history of this particular community. Okay? Let's go back to the beginning. Good morning, Dr. Taylor. Come on in. Make yourself at home. Ready? Everybody okay so far? Good so far? In the days when judges ruled, there was famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Nomi, and his 2 sons were Machlon and Chilion, Ephrathites. They come from the town of Ephrat, of Bethlehem in Judah. They came to the country of Moab, and they remained there. Now that's a pretty innocuous opening sentence, except if you read it carefully in the context of the rest of the Bible. First of all, there's an irony. This is a place called Beit Lechem, a place of food, and there's famine in Beit Lechem, right? And when there's famine in Beit Lechem, what happens? The man picks up his family and he leaves. The whole Torah is about coming home. The whole Torah is about the longing to return home. I would say to you that, if you're a Zionist especially, all of Jewish history is about coming home, about finding your place, about the relationship between this people, a family, the community, and their land, the promised land, the place of our nurturance. It's all about the connections in this land. But here you have a family that lives in the land, comes an economic downturn, and what do? They move on. They up and they leave. Jacob moved on. Right? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Right? Good questions, both good questions, right? So you have, the question here is, where is your connection to the land? And what does it take to get you to get up and just move on? Where is your connection to the community? Where is your connection to your people, to your history? This is the image you get at the very beginning, especially from his name, Eli Melech. And I'm going to emphasize the names again. Eli, my God, Melech is God. Eli is king. My God is king. Not ours, mine. I have my personal interests, my personal needs. They overcome the needs of the community and the collective. This is a man without roots. This is a man without connection. This is a man without loyalty. This is a man who moves on. And where does he go? He goes to Moab. Now, that's an outrage. So when I say Moab, you should all go, oh, Moab, right? He goes to Moab. Where's your response? Let me try that again. He goes to Moab. That's right. That's good. Now, why is Moab an outrage? Michael, come in. We got room. Get. Make room for the rabbi. Come on. Come on. Moab. First of all, geographically, you wouldn't go to Moab, because where is Moab? It's called Transjordan today. Okay? It's the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. If there's famine in Israel, you're not likely to find bread in Moab. Okay. So not only is he the rootless man, he's a mindless man. But there's more than that. Who is Moab? The people Moab are our mishpacha. They're cousins of ours. They're the children of Lot, right? Now, why do we have a problem with Moab? Because when we arrived in the land of Canaan from Egypt, we had to cross the territory of Moab to get there. There is an ethic in the desert that if a tribe among nomads and Bedouins, that if a tribe needs to cross the territory of another tribe, the way that you do it is you ask for permission to cross their land. You ask for permission to cross their land, and you make a contract that you're not going to mess with their resources. You're not going to drink from their wells. You're not going to take from their trees. It's just simply passing through. There's a legal term for this. What's the legal term for this? Is there a legal term for just passing through a land? Not trespassing. It's the opposite of trespassing, right? Like you get like an easement. You grant an easement. That's the word, right? You're allowed to pass through. Moses asks the king of Moab for permission to walk through. They should have been granted that permission because we're, after all, mishpacha. Come in. There's a place to sit. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the halls. To quote the Torah. Come in. There's seats. Come, Zets. Don't come over here. We got room over here. Come on. Come on. That's okay. Come on. We're good. Two on the aisle. Two right here. Two. A table for two right here, please. Right. Try the fish. It's excellent. Okay. No. She's got a spot. It's okay. All right. My job is a maitre d'. This is what God intended me to be, and this rabbi thing is a waste of time. Hi. Your grandkids are here. Come on. We were supposed to cross the territory of Moab, and Moab was supposed to let us. But Moab did not allow us to cross. They tried to make war against Israel. And Israel ended up having to go through with force. That is a violation of the ethics of the desert. The ethics of the desert matter because that's how you survive in a desert. The ethics of the desert are very, very particular about things like hospitality and welcome and family loyalty. So at the moment that we needed a note of family loyalty from our cousins, the Moabites, they did not allow it. Keep that in mind. Okay? Now, we come to Elimelech uproots his family, leaves his land, leaves his community, and settles in the far-off foreign land of Moab. And what happens, right? Elimelech dies. Well, of course he dies. Because that's what happens to rootless people. That's the Torah's basic idea, that a person without a place in the world doesn't have a place in the world, doesn't live. You need a place, you need a community, you need roots to live, right? And that left her with two sons. And they married Moabite women, one whose name was Orpah and the other's name was Ruth, and they lived there 10 years. And then both Machalon and Chilion died because the men have no roots. And that now leaves us with who? With Naomi, right? The woman was left without her sons and without her husband, which means what is she now? She's more than a widow. She's invisible. She's living in a strange land with people who don't know. She has no family roots, no family connections in this land. She has no husband and no children. She is off the grid. A woman in this culture is defined by the men that she's attached to, right? She's somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody's grandma. Who is Naomi? She's nobody's daughter because she's far away from home. She's nobody's wife, she's nobody's mother, and she's nobody's grandmother. She is an invisible woman. She is a woman without any connections. She's a human being without any connections. She's rendered socially invisible by this. She has no place in the world. There's no being in the world, no status in this world. So what must she do in order to regain some status? She has to go home, return to her land, which is the classic Jewish move, right? Everything in the Torah is about coming home. The whole Torah is about moving from Egypt to Canaan. The rest of the Bible is about gaining the land, losing the land, and returning to the land. Returning to the land. So she's going to return. She starts out with her daughters-in-law to return to the country of Moab. In the country of Moab, she heard the Lord had taken note of his people, give them food. And accompanied by the daughters-in-law, she left the place she'd been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. And she turns to these two women and she says to them, go home. Go home. What have I to give you? Go home. You have nothing in that land. You have families. You have a place in the world. And your place is back in Moab. I have nothing to offer you. Go home. Turn back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you've dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of a husband. She kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping. And they said, no, we'll return with you to your people. Now listen to that line again. We will return with you to your people. Who are they loyal to? To Naomi. We will return with you. These are daughters-in-law who are loyal to their mother-in-law. There are such things in the world. Right? In case you wondered, right? It actually can happen once in a while. They're loyal to her. We're not going to let you go. We're not going to let you go by yourself. We have a connection to you. There's a deep bond among these women. But she cares about them more than she cares about herself. And she's worried about them. Because what does she have ultimately to offer them? She says, no, turn back. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body? Go home. I'm too old to be married. And even if I thought there were hope, if I were married tonight and bore sons, why should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? I have nothing to give you. Go home. My life is far more bitter than yours, for the Lord has struck out against me. The word bitter is mar. Her name is Naomi, which means sweet. There's nothing sweet in her life. She's lost everything of value in her life. And she says to these two women, go home, I have nothing to give you. The least I can do is let you begin your lives again. And you can continue, because this is your place, and these are your people, and this is where you belong. And the two women now split. They broke into weeping, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. Ruth clung to her. And Orpah moves off, and Orpah goes home. And I told you this last year. The name Orpah is a weird name, right? We all know what happened to her. She moved to Chicago, got a television show, and became very famous. Okay? My understanding is that's actually her name, but it's very hard to say Orpah Winfrey, so you changed it to Oprah, right? The name Orpah, the word Orpah in Hebrew means the nape of the neck. Oref, right. Now, you can understand why. If a woman is wearing a burqa from her shoulders down, and she's wearing a headdress because she's a widow, and when she walks away from you, the only part of her that you see is the little teeny bit of the nape of her neck, right? It's the back as she walks away. That's what you see of her as she walks away. And where does Orpah go? Orpah goes back to a conventional life. She goes back to Moab. She marries an orthodontist. She joins the Republican Women's Club. She drives the kids to soccer. She drives the kids to soccer, and, she lives a very conventional life, and you never hear from her again. You have a choice in life, says this book, of living a conventional life, which is predictable and controllable, or you can do something which is radical. And Ruth represents the radical choice. And the next speech is the most famous speech in the book, right? They broke into weeping. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. Ruth clung to her. So Naomi tries a third time. She tries a third time to dissuade her. Your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. She has a place in the world. Go there. You belong there. You're not a stranger there. I can't tell you what's ahead of us. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know what's going to be waiting for us where I came from. For you especially, I don't know, because you have no roots in my land. Stay here where you have roots. Stay here where you have place. And Ruth says to her, do not urge me to leave you or turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I go. Wherever you lodge, I lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Thus and more, the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. It's a very beautiful, you'll hear it. There's an aria, is that the word for it? There's an aria in this oratorio. Is that how you say it, Sergio? A song, a solo. A solo, what do I know? There's a nice song on this piece. It's a very beautiful piece. The book sets up these interesting sort of oppositions, binaries, right? We have, the binaries are man and woman. The binaries are home and away. The binary is our people and those people, insiders and outsiders. Insiders and outsiders. Right? We all do this. We set binaries for ourselves because they define us and they provide a map of our existence. I know who I am because I know who I'm not. I know the boundaries between me and you, between our people and those people. I know the boundaries between here and there, between home and away. And I guard these boundaries because those boundaries give me a sense of security. And the book is a meditation on these boundaries. A book is a meditation about what happens when these boundaries are drawn too strongly and too firmly. So what does Ruth say? I will not leave you. Now, what is Ruth's relationship to Naomi? What are they to each other? This is your mother-in-law. There's not a blood relationship, right? This is the mother of your husband. And you've been living in her home or living next door for the last 10 years. And there is some connection there. And the connection, listen to the way that the connection is defined, because it's a very deep connection. Do not urge me to leave you or turn back for follow you, for where you go, I go, and where you lodge, I lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. I want to be part of your life. I want to cross this boundary between us and become part of your life. Now, if she were a daughter, you'd expect this, right? If she were a daughter, that's what you'd have expected. But as a daughter-in-law, particularly a daughter-in-law from another tribe, another culture, another people, and to say, your people are my people, and your God is my God. So one of the questions I asked you last year when we did this is, where did she learn anything about Jewish people? Or anything about the Jewish God, the God of Israel? There's no JCC in Moab. This I'm quite confident of. Right? There's no University of Judaism in Moab. There's no University of Judaism in LA anymore either, but there's no Institute of Jewish Identity. Where did she learn this? She learned this at Naomi's table. She learned this in Naomi's house. She, living with this family, she has become part of the culture of this family and the ways of this family. She's adopted the ways of this family to such an extent that she says, I can't separate myself. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Now, you can make your God my God. You can convert to a religion, right? If I convert to a religion, I profess belief in the other religion. I practice its rites. I adopt its doctrines as my personal faith. I start telling its stories as my story. Can you make your people my people? Can you convert to an ethnicity? Can you enter another? Think for a minute. Can you? I mean, think for a moment about the position of being a daughter-in-law or son-in-law in a family. Anyone ever had this experience being a daughter-in-law or son-in-law in a family? Like you're at the table, you're part of the family, you're included, and yet there's always a degree of separation because you weren't there when the happened. You weren't there the night that we, you weren't on that family trip. You weren't with us when, and there's always this interesting degree of in English we have a word for it. That's why it's called son-in-law or daughter. It's not just son or daughter, It's interesting. So you're included, but you're not included. You're part of it, but you're not part of it. It's a very interesting dynamic. So what's being meditated, can you cross the line and join another tribe? Can you cross the line and join another community? What happens when you try? What happens when you try to do that? You come at that with tremendous loyalty and tremendous love and tremendous desire to do so. And the question is, are you permitted to do so? Are you really permitted to do so? Watch how the Bible deals with this, right? So when Naomi saw she determined she was to go, she ceased to argue, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" See, in a little town, nothing ever changes. Nothing changes, right? I mean, the biggest exciting thing is 7-Eleven gets another, flavor of ice cream. That's the biggest thing that happens. Somebody leaves a town, comes back 10 years later. It's like, whoo, big news. And she comes back, and what does she look like? A person who has lost a husband and 2 kids, what does she look like? She does not look like 10 years. She looks like 110 years, right? She does not look like herself. She wears her grief on her face. And so they say, behind her back, I mean, you can hear the whispering in the marketplace. Can you believe what she looks like? Can this be Naomi? And she turns to them and says, call me Mara. Mara means bitterness. For Shaddai, God, and Shaddai is the name of God who is supposed to protect you. Shemer de Latot Yisrael, right. Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full and God brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when God has been so harsh against me? Now the end of the chapter, and gives you a clue of the drama that's about to come. Thus Naomi returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth HaMoaviyah, Ruth the Moabite. Now, what happened to Ruth when she crossed the border? She got a last name. In Moab, she was who? Ruth. Maybe Ruth, wife of Machalon, daughter-in-law of Naomi. But once she crosses the border into Judah, she now becomes Ruth what? Ruth the Moabite, right. And the Moabite, and that's exactly right. So let's pick that she's exactly right. Moaviyah means the other. The other. The one who's not like us. Who's not one of us. She's not one of us. In fact, she's so much not one of us, if you'll turn to the very back page, I'll show you how much she's not supposed to be one of you. Look at Deuteronomy 23. Rather than look it up in the book, I just put it here, right? No Ammonite, those are the people of Ammon, they're also our cousins, by the way, or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. You can't let them in. The boundaries between us and them are firm. Canaanites, not so bad. You can have Canaanites in your family, okay? You can have, look what it says next, right? None of their descendants, even the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted to the congregation of the Lord because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt. They rejected the ethics of the desert that demanded familial hospitality, or at least the rights of easement, the rights of walking through. They didn't treat you like family. You never let them into your family. They are a pollutant. They are poison to you, right? And if you go to the end of it, look at verse 8. You will not abhor an Edomite. He is your kinsman. An Edomite you can marry, right? You'll not abhor an Egyptian, for you were strangers in his land. That's the weirdest thing. The Egyptians? The ones who made us slaves? The ones who threw our children into the Nile? No, they're okay. Them we can get along. We can do business with them. They're okay, right? You marry an Egyptian, you have children, they're Jewish. You marry an Edomite, they're Jewish. You marry a Moabite? No. Not only is she shiksa, she is, if you'll excuse the expression, uber shiksa. That's a technical term that rabbis use, right? Shiksa in Yiddish means the one you don't want around. Now, it comes, by the way, it's a very interesting word, shiksa. It comes from the Hebrew word sheketz. The Hebrew word sheketz is a reptile that renders you ritually impure and unqualified to participate in the communal worship of the Jewish community. She is a pollutant, a contaminant, poison. Poison! Poison. She is never to be she's the outsider, the other, right? This now becomes Ruth's last name. So the girl who wants to join the community, the woman who wants to join the community, she crosses the political border into Judah with her mother-in-law, but when she arrives in the community, what does she discover? She can't cross the cultural barrier. She is always the outsider. She's always the excluded one. She's always the one who's not to be let in. The boundary is firm. Right? Persona non grata. Right. Okay? Now, they arrived during the barley harvest. Ready? Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance, the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I'd like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who show me some kindness. And she says, yes. So the image you get is the following. They come home, and Naomi is still so broken from the experience of her grief that she's immobilized. She's completely passive. She can't take any step toward her own survival. Imagine her coming to her house and sitting on the floor of the living room, just impassively. And Ruth realizes they're going to starve to death. So Ruth says, I will go get food. And she knows that the tradition of a farming village is that the poor of the village are permitted to come and glean. Glean means to follow the reapers, and anything that the reapers don't get to, or anything that's dropped by the reapers, the poor of the community are permitted to go and pick up. It's not easy work. It's difficult work. But it's the way that a poor person, a landless person, makes a living in such a culture. So she said, I'll go and glean, right? And as luck would have it, and there's no luck in the Bible, she went to glean. It was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. Nice to see you again. You guys, you had enough Ruth, huh? Maspikim mikra. Okay, see you guys later. Bye. Shabbat shalom. Good yontif. Goodbye. See you later. Come back at your bar mitzvah. Mazel tov. יפה מאוד. כמה יש לך? באמת? גוואלד. וואו. פה בארץ, חמישה פה יפה מאוד. אורגון. Galut min galut. All right. So she goes to glean, right? Boaz arrives from Bethlehem. And Boaz says, and he greets the reapers, the Lord be with you, and they say, the Lord bless you. And Boaz said to the servants in charge of the reaper, who's that girl? He doesn't recognize her. He knows the people of the town. So who is Boaz? Tell me about Boaz. Boaz is Elimelech's opposite. They're the same age, they're the same generation, right? Elimelech, when the downturn, when the drought came, Elimelech leaves and goes to Moab. What did Boaz do? He stayed. He stays. Why did he stay? Well, he has land, but so did Elimelech have land. But Boaz stayed on the land even though it was drought. Boaz stayed on the land even though there was drought. Why did he stay on the land even though there was drought? Sorry, what? He has a deep loyalty to his land and a deep loyalty to his people. He has such a loyalty to the village that he knows everybody in the village. So if there's a new woman who is gleaning on the field, even that woman, he sees her. She is invisible to everybody, but he sees her. He's the only one who sees her. The guy who says, she's just a girl. She's just another girl, right? And in fact, the reaper knows her. He knows it, and he's heard, because this is like gossip goes through a village. Everybody knows. She's the Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. Translation, she's the Shiksa from Shiksa land. Oh, that one. Right? And she said, let me glean and gather the sheaves behind the reaper. She's been on her feet till the morning. She's rested little. She's a hardworking girl. Now, Boaz turns to Ruth. Look at the next line, top of page 2. It doesn't seem very important to you, but the next 4 words, I think, are the most important 4 words in the whole story. Boaz said to Ruth, what's missing? Boaz said to Ruth. David, what? The Moabite. Everybody sees her and says, Shiksa, other. She's not us. She's not one of us. She doesn't belong here. Why is she here? She doesn't belong here. Everyone sees her and says, she doesn't belong here. Why doesn't she belong here? Because she's from another place. She's from the other side of the line. She's a Moabite. Everyone else defines her by her ethnic, national, political, genetic origin, except Boaz. Boaz doesn't see Moabite. Boaz doesn't see ethnic origin. Boaz doesn't judge somebody according to that standard. He sees Ruth and he says to her, listen to me, daughter, don't go to another field. Don't go elsewhere. Stay here. I mean, you would imagine what was he supposed to do? He's supposed to go to her and say, get the hell off my property. You don't belong here. You're not one of us. The law that allows the poor to glean doesn't apply to you. Get the hell out of here. That's what he's supposed to say. He says exactly the opposite. Stay here. Stay here. What you need, you will find here. The nourishment you need, the strength you need, the people you're looking for, the God you seek, you will find here. Stay here. I will protect you. And she says to him, because she doesn't get it, because she has now internalized the politics of this community, she says, why are you so kind to me? I'm a foreigner. Don't you know who I am? I'm a shiksa. She doesn't believe that this guy, and he says to her, I don't look at life that way. Right? I don't define you in those binaries. I have a different set of binaries that I measure the world by. And here's the revolution of the book. The revolution of the book is by what measure you define identity. What determines your belonging or your not belonging? What determines your place or your not being in this place? What defines you? And frankly, I think the question is, what defines you as a Jew? Well, this is the question. So there's a really interesting question, your actions, because you know what you just said? You just said a very, very radical thing, doctor. Is it about being Jewish or about doing Jewish? Is it about being Jewish or about doing Jewish? Right? I have in my own family, interesting case, okay? In many interesting cases in my family. We have a very colorful family, right? Actually, it's my wife's family is very colorful. My family is pretty normal. So my wife's nephew married a Thai girl, a girl from Thailand. Beautiful girl. I mean, lovely girl. And this Thai girl grew up in a very warm, loving Thai family. But when she entered our family, right, she started hanging out with my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law taught her how to make challah, right? So every Friday night, this beautiful Thai girl bakes challah and lights Shabbos candles and sets a Shabbos table for Shlugan nephew-in-law, who has never set a Shabbos table in his life. And she forces him to sit down and make a Shabbos meal. And she taught him how to read the Kiddush. And they have a kid. And now he says Kiddush at the table because his wife won't let him not. And she puts out a nice Shabbos table and a Hanukkah table. And she makes a Seder for them. She never went through any kind of conversion. She just really likes this stuff. Thai families have all kinds of mixed up, interesting religious backgrounds, partly Buddhist, partly village. She finds a real affinity to the stuff that we do, family, education, tradition, food. These are all Thai traditions like they're Jewish traditions, and she's very happy. Is she Jewish? No, listen for a moment. I'm going to ask you this question, and I ask this question b'tmimut Thai. Listen very carefully. In the next generation, this is going to be the biggest question we have to wrestle with here. Because I don't know how many of you have people in your families who have married people who were born not Jewish. But what makes you Jewish and not Jewish? Is it what you were born? Is there a political boundary, a line that says you're in, you're out? Or is it what you do? This becomes a very serious question. Who belongs to us? Who belongs to us? What makes you a part of us? Right? It's a very interesting question. You know, you'd look at my niece and you'd say, you Taka don't look Jewish, right? But you make a damn good challah, you know, and you set a beautiful Shabbos table. So this question of identity, and this isn't the first time in Jewish history when this question of identity, of us and them, of our people and those people, we've become seriously engaged in this conversation. So here's the speech. Boaz says in reply, I have been told all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother, the land of your birth, and came to the people you'd not known before. Now, that's a very famous space, and what's happening there is, again, the book of Ruth knows the rest of the Torah. Who else in the Torah left a place of their father and mother and followed a God they had not known before? Avram Avinu. What's the difference between Ruth and Avram Avinu? Avram Avinu was told by God to leave his father and mother and come to the land that he had not known before. Ruth did it without being told. Ruth did it because she saw the life of Naomi and the life of her children and said, this is a life I want to attach myself to. So in a certain sense, Ruth is a greater level, a higher level than Avram Avinu, than Abraham, you see? There's a conscious reference to that story. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you've sought refuge. It's beautiful. He says, welcome and be here, and God will protect you. And she answered, you are most kind, my Lord, to comfort me and speak gently to your maidservant, though I'm not so much as one of your maidservants. She still understands the way she's seen in the community. And she understands how extraordinary that he is. So she goes home with a big basket of grain, and the mother-in-law says, where'd you get the grain? And she said, I met the most extraordinary man today, and his name is Boaz. At the sound of that name, something awakens inside Naomi. You always know that a person who is grieving is beginning to heal when they can think about what they're going to do tomorrow. The person in grief only thinks about now and yesterday. But the moment they can say, tomorrow I'm going to, that's the beginning of healing. And Boaz triggers that in Naomi. And suddenly, look at chapter 3. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said, daughter, I must seek a home for you where you will be happy. Now, up until now, who's been doing all the talking? Up until now, it's been Ruth, right? Naomi said, go home, go home, go home. 3 times she said, go home. And Ruth said, no, I will go with you. And Naomi never responded. When Ruth said, I'm going to go get food, Naomi never responded. For the very first time, Naomi turns to Ruth and says, I need to do something for you. What happened here? Ruth became visible to Naomi. First she becomes visible to Boaz, and now she becomes visible to Naomi. And why is she visible to Naomi? Because Naomi knows something about Boaz that nobody else knows, right? She knows his character, and she knows that he's alone. And suddenly a plan forms in her mind, right? Some enchanted evening, you will meet a Moabite, far across a crowded threshing floor. And ready? Now there's our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. So I told you last time, quickly, a quick lesson about Israelite geography. Southern Israel, they grow barley. Barley is a grass. When the buds of the barley start to bloom, start to grow, start to pop, the trick is to let it stay in the field as long as possible so those grains of barley are full, but not so long as a springtime rain might come, because if it gets rained on, it's all going to rot and you're going to starve. It's a very tricky thing to do. So what they do is they wait till just now, the just end of the spring, beginning of summer. And then the whole village goes out. All the men of the village go out. And the men of the village collectively harvest everybody's fields. The men of the village harvest all the fields, and the fields are harvested. All that grain has to be brought into the town, threshed, that's cleaned up, and then siloed. All that stuff has to be threshed and siloed and stored so that it's protected from the springtime rains. All the men go out and they spend day and night living in the fields, cutting. All that time they spend time pulling that stuff into town, threshing, siloing, and then when it's all done, these men who have not bathed in a week and a half and have been living among other men, sleeping in their work clothes, well, they have a little get-together. What do you make out of barley? Beer. And ancient Near Easterns knew how to make beer and ale. They knew how to make a really good, strong beer. So after the harvest is brought in, and after the harvest is threshed, and after the harvest is milled, it's Miller time. When it's time to relax, one beer stands clear. Beer after beer. And these men who have been out in the field for days and nights and nights and days in their work clothes and have not bathed, they're on the threshing floor tying one on. And after they've gotten good and rowdy tying one on, they do what real men do. They find some place to contribute to the ecology, and then they lie down and they have sweet, wonderful, beer-fueled dreams. And what is Naomi telling Ruth to do? Bathe, and I've always said this needs a B.B. King soundtrack, right? Da-da-da-dump, right? Put on your red dress and your high-heel shoes and some of that sweet perfume, da-da-da-dump, and go down to the threshing floor, da-da-da. You're not helping me here, guys. Come on. I need that B.B. King soundtrack, da-da-da-dump, right? Now, what's going on the threshing floor? It's all men. It's all men. Men who are drunk. Men who are exhausted from work. Men who reek to high heaven. And Ruth is going to go down there. She's going to go down to this place of the men. And what is she going to do? Wait, it's worse. It gets worse. When he lies, bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, go down to the threshing floor. Da-da-da-dump. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. Da-da-da-dump. And when he lies down, note the place where he lies down. Da-da-da-dump. And go and uncover his feet. Feet. Adventures in podiatry. And lie down. He will tell you what you're going to do. No doubt. I'm kibitzing, but this is terribly serious. She's being told to do what? Go down to the place of the men. All the men. No women, just men. Go down dressed up in a seductive way. Go down and lay next to that man and touch him. Seduce him. And what is Naomi counting on? Any other man, any man would rape her, have her, use her, and throw her away. She's invisible, right? Understand that the Bible has 3 words for a person who is vulnerable. Stranger, widow, orphan, right? Ruth is all 3. She is the stranger. She is the Moaviah living in Judah. She is a widow. She is an orphan because she separated herself from her parents. She is a young woman of sexual time, sexual age. She's sexually active. She's seductive. She's fertile. She's youthful. She's beautiful. She is the paradigm of vulnerability. There's no protections for this woman. And where is she being sent? To the place of the men. And which men? The men who are inebriated. And what is she being told to do? Take off your clothes. Take off whatever protections you have. Put yourself in this place of complete and utter vulnerability. Because the only power that she has is her sexual power. Use your sexual power. That's the only thing you have. But put yourself in this place of complete and utter vulnerability. And what is Naomi counting on? That Boaz is a mensch. That he's not just any other man. Right? He's not just any man. Any man would have her and throw her away. But he's not that way. That's what they're counting on. This is a test of Boaz. Right? We've had before a test of Ruth. Ruth passed the test, right? Standing at the crossroads when Naomi said, go away, go home. There's a better way for you. Ruth goes with Naomi. She takes this radical choice to follow the mother-in-law and pursue her gods and her people. Now the question is, what does Boaz have inside of him? So let's see what happens. You ready? You want to see what happens? Okay. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law instructed her. Boaz ate and drank and in a cheerful mood went down to lie beside the grain pile. She went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. I just want one more note because I don't want to move too quickly through the story. This is terrifying. I mean, it's easy to kibitz about this, of course, but stop for a moment and think about what's being told here. I mean, I told you at the beginning, the Torah, the Bible loves epochal stories. David and Goliath, Jericho and Joshua and the walls of Jericho, Elijah and the prophets of Baal. But in its own way, this is an epic. The woman is being sent to this place of utter, complete vulnerability. And the question is, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to her? It's a terrifying story. And what I'm going to suggest to you in just a moment is the following. That on one level, this is a story. On another level, this is a parable. What does she want, this woman? She wants to become part of the people and become part of its God. And what is this story telling us? We who are insiders, about the outsider who's trying to come into our circle. This is what we do to people. This is the extent of the vulnerability that one has to face to enter our circle. We draw the lines of our circle so tightly that we force people into this position. This is the ultimate invisibility. It's dark. It's dark. This all happens under cover of night, right? This is what we do to invisible people. What happens to her, right? I know you want to know. So she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a start and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet, right? So what the Bible does beautifully is, in the Jacob and Rachel story, when Jacob wakes up in the morning, and the Torah says, V'hinehi Leah, we see this story through Jacob's eyes. For this moment, we see this story through Boaz's blurry eyes. He wakes up in the middle of the night, and there's a woman lying with him, right? Who are you, he asked. That's the most important question. The whole question is about who are you? And she says, I'm your handmaid Ruth, spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. Now that's a very complicated sentence. But so here's how the complication sentence works, like follows. She says, I am your servant Ruth. Spread your robe over me. Spreading a robe over someone is a sign of betrothal. You ever been to a Sephardic wedding? At the end of the wedding, they cover the couple in a tallis. That's the custom. It's referenced in the book of Ezekiel that God spreads God's tallis over the people Israel to betroth himself to them. And remember what Boaz blessed her earlier? The earlier blessing was, may you have full refuge, may you have full recompense from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you've sought refuge. So when she says, put your robe over me, what is she saying? You are the God, you are representing the God of Israel. Put your wings over me and protect me. You are my goel. Redeeming kinsman. The Hebrew word is goel. Goel literally means my savior, my salvation, my rescuer. And it means three different things at the same time. It means three different things at the same time. First, there's the technical meaning. And I gave you all the stuff on the back if you want to read it later. In Jewish law, there are two technicalities. If a family goes into poverty and they want to sell their property, the first right of refusal has to go to the nearest relative before that property is sold to an outsider. That person is called your goel, your redeemer. Second, if a woman is a widow and she has no children, she is supposed to be married to his nearest relative. That person's called yivum, but that can also be seen as a goel in order to keep alive the family name. But the third level is, she's a placeless person. She has no family. She has no parents now. She's far away from her parents. She has no people. She has no children. She has no husband. She says to him, you're the only one who could save me. You're my goel. It's a personal thing. You are my savior. You're my rescuer. Right? And he says to her, be blessed of the Lord, daughter, your latest deed of loyalty is greater than your first, and that you've not turned to younger men, poor or richer. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask. For all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. But while it's true that I'm a redeeming kinsman, there's another kinsman closer than me. So stay for the night. Then in the morning, if he will act as redeemer, good, let him redeem. If he does not act as redeemer, I will do so myself. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning. Let's go work on this. Let's go backwards through this. He's a lawyer. Boaz has a legal mind. And he hears the word goel. And he doesn't think that she's whispering a poetic thing in his ear saying, rescue me, right? The Aretha Franklin song, right? He thinks she means the technical legal sense. And he says, well, as a matter of fact, there's a guy who's closer than me. There's a guy who's closer than me, but we'll take care of that in the morning. That's a little unpoetic, don't you think? I mean, he didn't need to tell her that now. But then he says something really very sweet. He says, stay. You don't look like this. If this were a good Protestant text, if this were Bible back in Texas, she'd say, honey, get out of here now. Preserve your virtue until we can be properly married by the justice of the peace. Right? Isn't that what you'd say? But the Bible is not Protestant. The Bible is Jewish. And the Bible has a very deep respect for human beings and their impulses. And no guy in the middle of the night with a woman stroking his feet is going to say, go home. Nope. No, at least no Jewish man. That I can this I can testify. So he says, we'll work all that legal stuff out tomorrow. Meanwhile, stay the night. I think that's charming. I don't know about you guys. I think that's absolutely charming. But the most important one is the first sentence. Go back to that sentence with me. This is a big surprise, a beautiful surprise. He says, be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than your first, and that you've not turned to younger men, rich or poor. What was her first deed of loyalty? Coming back with Naomi. Coming home with, accompanying Naomi. She gave up everything in her life to follow her mother-in-law back to her home. That was her first act of loyalty. What does he mean by your latest deed of loyalty? What latest deed of loyalty is he talking about? Well, they give you a clue in the rest of the sentence. Your latest deed of loyalty, in that you've not turned to younger men, rich or poor. Elimelech is Boaz's contemporary. Boaz is Elimelech's contemporary. He's her father-in-law's age and station. And because they don't reference a wife anywhere in here, he's a widower. And it's been a long time since he's been a widower, right? It's been a long, long time. And it's been a long time since he's been with a woman, right? And it's been a long time in which he's felt the stirrings of his own masculinity and his own fertility and his own inner strength. And she came to him instead of going to a younger guy. And she has awakened in him something powerful. Desire, love, affection, emotion, and physical virility. Right? Physical virility. And so what does he say to her? Right? Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than your first. In coming to me and reviving that part of me is even a greater act of loyalty for me than what you did for Naomi. It's a beautifully phrased poetic expression. And I don't want to get too gross about that. I don't want to be physically, I don't want to be too, pornographic about this. But what he's talking about is that she's awakened things in him which he didn't know he had inside of himself because it's been so very long. His own strength, his own masculinity, his own fertility, his own creativity. Right? And he says to her, she came to him and says, you are my Goel, you are my Redeemer. He turns to her and says, no, you are mine. You are my Redeemer. Because you have awakened in me these forces which I didn't know I still had, these powers which I didn't know I still had. That's a remarkable statement. That's a remarkable statement, right? Leah is the one who gives Jacob most of his children. Tamar is the one who gives Judah his heir, so that Judah can continue in the world, right? And what does Ruth do for Boaz? She finds in him his own powers of production and reproduction and creativity and fertility and fecundity and life and life and life, and reawakens that power within him. So what is the Torah telling you about outsiders and insiders? What is the Bible, what is this book saying about the role of outsiders and insiders? About invisible people, right? What is it saying?
Sometimes we need outsiders to rejuvenate an existing community.
Right, not just sometimes. That's how we do it. You draw the line too firmly and exclude, you stifle the life of this people. The life of this people is revived only when you open that door. You open you open up that line. You eliminate that binary. Or put it differently, the binary is a different binary. It's not us, them. Our people, those people. What is the binary? People of loyalty, people who want to be part of this community and seek the protection of this God, and those who don't. And those who, in other words, the binary is not ethnic anymore. The binary is moral. What's happened here is beautifully remarkable. For Boaz, a Jew is a person of chesed, of loyalty and love. And a Moabite is not somebody born in Moab. A Moabite is a person who rejects the claims of family and loyalty and love. They take the ethnic categories and turn them into moral categories. It's ethnic categories into moral categories, or as you said before, it's not a question of being Jewish, it's a question of doing Jewish. It's a question of character. It's a question of morals. It's a question of the way that you're being in the world, of a deep sense of belonging. Not of who your parents were, your grandparents were, your ancestors were. That's a very radical idea of identity in this book. It's a radical idea of identity in this book. Now there's one more short little vignette at the end, which we want to end with, okay? They go to the gate in the morning to settle up accounts. And the guy who has the closer claim to Ruth and to Naomi's estate is a guy named Ploni Almoni. And Boaz says to Ploni, I have to disclose to you that you have the more robust claim on this estate than I do. And Ploni says, great, I'll buy the field. I'll buy the field, because it's hard to get property in that world. Property was hard to come by. And even if it cost him a lot of money, right? How do you figure the price of a piece of property? You figure how many years of income from that property will take you to pay off the mortgage, right? Right? So even if it, by the way, even if it's longer than his lifetime, his kids will get that piece of property. And if they have to finish paying the mortgage, eventually the mortgage will be paid off, right? And the property will be theirs, and it will become an income-producing property. Did I get that right? Some of you know this more better than I do, right? Now, then Boaz says, oh yeah, you also get the girl. Oh yeah. That's not so good for Ploni. Why not? Because if he also gets the girl, he has to marry the girl. And if he marries the girl and they have a kid, a child, which is likely because she's young and beautiful, right, and healthy, right? That child will not be Ben Ploni, the son of Ploni. That son will be Ben Machalon, Ben Elimelech. You always name the kid for the dead father. Do you see how that works? The dead first husband. You see how that works? And if there's a field, that field will not revert to Ploni's heirs upon his death. That field will revert to that child. Which means that while this is the right thing to do to preserve the name of family, this is the expression of family loyalty, it's not a good business deal. Ploni says, no, that will impair my estate. I don't want to do that. And they say, okay, and they go through the legal procedure to uncouple him from this arrangement, and Boaz assumes responsibility for the field and the woman, and the Jewish tradition curses this guy Ploni with the best curse ever. He is cursed forever in Jewish life with the most ingenious curse. His name Ploni Almoni, the man who refused to do right by his family because it was too expensive. Ploni Almoni becomes the name of anonymity. The man who refused to preserve the name of his family in the world becomes the name of anonymity. In Israel, when you get junk mail, it's addressed to Ploni Almoni. Resident, occupant. Right. Ploni Almoni is the name of anybody. John Doe. Okay? John Doe. It's in contract forms and in other kinds of forms where there's it doesn't say put your name here, it says Ploni Almoni. Okay? His name, Ploni Almoni, is the name of anonymity. Why? Because he didn't want to keep the name of the family alive. So Boaz says, I'll take the girl, I'll take the field. Boaz marries Ruth, right? And they have a kid. I acquire Ruth the Moabite, wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, to keep the kid, the family, and the land together as one. Keep the land and the family together as one, right? And now they bless her, as I showed you before. So Ruth married Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife. He cohabited, and the Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, has not withheld a redeemer from you today." Who is Naomi's redeemer? The baby. Because while she has no husband and she has no parents and she has no children, all of a sudden she has a grandchild, right? And as you will attest, if you're somebody's bubby, you're somebody, right? If you're somebody's bubby, you're somebody. And now Naomi is a bubby, and she has reason to live in the world, right? And she became his foster mother. And they said a son is born to Naomi, and they named him Oved, and he was the father of Yishai, who was the father of Melech David. So the ultimate shtoch of the end of the story is what? He is the ancestor of the greatest king of Israel, the king who created the people Israel. David Melech Yisrael Chai v'Kayam. Why? Why is she the great-grandmother of King David? Why is this story associated with King David? Just because it's a story about the binaries, right? And who is King David, by the way? Not just the great king of Israel who unites the tribes of Israel into one. King David is the ancestor of Messiah, of Goel, of the ultimate Goel. So how is redemption brought into the world? Says the book of Ruth. Redemption is brought into the world, says the book of Ruth, by recognizing that the binary that defines our identity is not an ethnic binary or a political binary, but a moral binary of the heart, right? It's not a question of who was your parents or your grandparents. That's not important. What's important is this question of loyalty and love. People of loyalty and love belong here. People of loyalty and love have a place with us. People of loyalty and love bring us fertility, creativity, and they ensure our future. And they belong to us no matter where they come from. No matter where they come from. That's the great radical message of this book. It is an attempt to redefine the whole question of identity, of who we are. We're not a political people. We're not an ethnic people. We're a people that walks the world with a certain attitude about what it means to be a human being. And if you have that attitude, if you have that sense of loyalty and love, it doesn't matter where you live. Placelessness is not geography. It's a question of whether the community you're part of, right? Whether you feel connection to the community that you live with and a deep loyalty to that community and to its ethos, to its feeling, its ethics.